ZUG.
Hey guys, it's Apex and I want to show you pretty much everything you need to know for your Arms Warrior in Wrath PvP. I will show you their Bis Gearing setups for the beginning and final seasons, as well as how you'll kind of gear throughout with a few caveats. And then I'll show you their playstyle, and then gymming, enchanting, macros, talents, glyphs, as well as some alternatives to that. So let's get into it. All right, so how is Warrior's playstyle different from BC? Well, if you're just coming from BC, basically it's a little faster pace as pretty much everything is. You have a few more buttons to press, but you will charge in, and then you'll basically get the Juggernaut proc, which will give you a lot of crit on your next MS. So you can just start with a big MS, or you can do a rend. So pretty much your first global after charge will be hamstring, rend, or mortal strike. It could also be piercing half. There's a lot of enemies around over the hamstring, but basically you're starting with the slow and then either rend or MS. You'll do rend if you just want to get unrelenting assaults rolling and get the bleed up. Otherwise, just getting the MS right away to get some more damage going is usually the better option, but maybe you're against a rogue or something and you don't want to risk not critting, and then they could stealth because they have no bleeds on them. So that's pretty minor, but that is a thing to min-max. And basically the way you play is you're just charging stuff, you're just doing as much damage as you can, and then while people are on you, you're trying to reflect things like a cyclone or a polymorph or a deep freeze or something like that if you can time it. And your whole goal is to do as much pressure as possible, which essentially means keeping MS up all the time while also keeping up unrelenting assault as much as you can. This is what will give them 50% less casting. If I couldn't kill them, I'd show you the debuff, but they would take 50% less healing and do 50% less caster damage while also being healed 50% less. So if you're doing this on a healer, they're healing themselves for a quarter of their normal amount. So you take your damage plus anyone else, they're dying so quickly or popping lots of cooldowns, and that's what makes Warriors so scary. So you really just have to stay alive while you're doing those two things. However you got to stay alive, that is your main goal. All right guys, I'm gonna try and do a live commentary for you. I got with a prop pally and a resto druid, it looks like. Not the most geared. And we're against WLP. I assume we're gonna be staying on the warlock most of the time, but maybe we swap to the priest. I don't know what this pally wants to do. I'm just gonna start off just getting as much pressure as I can, get a UA on that, so now it does 50% less damage on the dots, and he's jumping down. I'm not gonna chase him, I'm just gonna hit the pet. He's probably gonna pour it up. And we got pain sub on him, great. So I'm not gonna go down, just gonna keep pressure on the pet, lower the damage of the warrior with some stuff, and I'm not gonna go down on him yet. Got the pet. Okay, I might go on him now, or I think I'm just going on the priest because it looks like the pally's running there. Just gonna go on him hard. He has no pain sub, and if this warrior doesn't get close, I'm just gonna trinket this and go for a blade storm in battle stance so I get the ARP. And I'm trying to stay away from the warrior. There he is, because he wants to disarm. Looks like he's just going offensive with the recklessness, and his priest is gonna die because he's not disarming me. Essentially, we just trained one to the ground, and the warlock stayed down below because they don't want me to chase him. So I'm going to try and go through the talents really quickly as I go more in depth in one of my other videos. So firstly, we'll be doing 2 points in the rend and then 3 in the parry. You don't really want to get this as you're not using Rogue Strike a ton of the time, and this parry actually will help you survive. And then Iron Will, just great, lets CC on you. Technical Mastery, this will let you swap stances and reflect whenever you want. And we're going to get crit damage and then deep wounds, big damage, and a dot for the stealthers. We're going to do 2 points in here. So Overpower ends up having almost 100% crit chance with Bis Gear before Resil, which is insane. Then we'll be doing 3 points into two-handed weapon spec, just 6% damage. Taste for Blood, this will make it so when we apply Rend, we'll be getting a Overpower for free, which will help you apply the Unrelenting Assault, which I will show you later. And then you'll do 1 point into sweeping strikes, and then 5 into whatever weapon spec you have. Sword spec is better than it was technically in BC, as it'll have a higher proc chance, but it does have an ICD of 6 seconds, which will make it so you can't just get crazy lucky and one-shot someone like you could in BC with a Resto Shaman. Mace spec is good, you can get armor pins, so if you do get a good mace, that's fine. But axes and polearms are the best regardless, so go for that. And then we'll be doing 2 into weapon mastery. This is just a free weapon chain, so you can throw executioner or berserker on your weapon. And then we'll be doing 2 points into trauma, just more bleed damage, another debuff, and it helps a lot if you have like a feral on your team. You get this in BC, but we don't really have many points to freely spend on it unless you want to drop something like, let's say, Blood Craze from Fury, but you really do like that healing. Then of course you get Mortal Strike, second wind. This heals you so much, just like it does in BC, and a lot more rage. Strength of arms, just stats, good weights for only 2 points. Improved Mortal Strike, so it'll be a shorter cooldown. It goes from 6 seconds to 5. And then Juggernaut, this will let you use charge in combat. So nice compared to BC, where you get outrange from somebody and they would ruin your charge because they would outrange you. And then Unrelenting Assault, this is basically the best talent in this whole tree, or second best behind Mortal Strike. This will make it so whenever you're using overpower, you will be able to apply a huge damage and healing debuff to people. And so when you stack that with your Mortal Strike and then just the great damage you have, the pressure and Arms Warrior can do alone, even with just a one-hander on. If he's applying MS and UA, things are going to be very difficult to keep up. Then you have Blood Frenzy, just a debuff and more attack speed, so more rage. Then more rage generation, great. And then this will give you a proc, so you can just freely use your execute throughout the game regardless of their HP. And then 5 points into Wrecking Crew. This is an Enrage, 10% damage. And then Blade Storm. This move is amazing. If you can use it when a disarm is down or someone's too far away to disarm you, you can do crazy damage with this. And then Fury will be doing 5% crit, 2 points for AoE and duration, and then just more AP. And this will actually give you more AP when you throw on your shield, as you'll have, 9,000 with whatever shield you're using. And then Piercing How, just get AoE, and then Blood Craze. This heals you a lot. If you really wanted to do a little more damage or something, which I don't really see anywhere he's doing this, but you could take out the Blood Craze and you could throw that into your Imp Hamstring if you just want to have a little more uptime, or you can even throw into charge, but I would highly advise against doing that. And that is your talents. Then to go through the glyphs really quickly, the minors are pretty simple. You just do Glyph of Battle or Commanding, which will just give you 2 minutes more. Then you'll do a free Blood Rage glyph, and then 5 yards more on your charge. You have to get this one the best minor by far. And then for your majors, we're doing 10% damage on Mortal Strike. This one's probably the best glyph, or second best. And then Glyph of Rending, just a longer duration on Rend. You don't have to use as many globals on it. It'll also make it so if a rogue or druid or something's trying to re-stealth, or possibly even a mage invis, then you don't have to worry about the Rend falling off, and it will still break them out of stealth. And then more procs for Taste for Blood, which means more Unrelenting Assault. And for the last glyph, Glyph of Overpower. This one is dead against wizards. However, if you go up against something like a DK, Pally, Warrior, anybody who can parry, and you don't have this glyph, it's going to hurt you massively. So I think it's still worth it to run this. However, you can change it out if you know exactly what you're queuing into. If you're going up against Shadow Frost, Dis Mage, whatever, then you could swap this out for maybe the shorter cooldown on Blade Storm, or the Enraged Regeneration, bigger heal, as well as the chance on proc for the Hamstring. And that is it for the glyphs. What are the best professions for Arms Warriors in Wrath PvP? I think it's pretty clear. Jewel crafting is #1, as not only does it give you the highest stat weights, but it also gives you the most flexibility, because only jewel crafting and blacksmithing can give you armor pin or resilience. So depending on whether you're really high in resilience, need armor pin, or vice versa, you can easily swap it out with your gear. And it also is a little cheaper, as throwing in a gem like this will make it so you don't have to buy the regular gem, and these gems typically are about half the price anyway. And then the other profession is blacksmithing. You can throw into your gloves and your bracers a prismatic socket, so you can put any gem in here, and it doesn't matter because there's no socket bonus. With the final gem, it doesn't affect the main bonus. So if you're running JC and blacksmithing, you can basically get an extra 82 resilience at the end of the game with these two professions combined. And then the third notable mention would be engineering. You can get the glove enchant, which would be rocket gloves. You wouldn't go for anything else, but rocket gloves can help if you're far away from something, you want to get in combat, stop a res. It's off the GCD, so it adds a little bit of burst. But in my opinion, I think it's much better just to have the raw stats on the warrior, because you're just pumping damage the whole time, or you're getting attacked, and it's good to have flexibility there. I'll show you the Bis Gearing setup you can do at the beginning of Wrath, and then I'll go more in depth to the general gearing as well as Bis setups later, and all the enchants and whatnot. So gearing at the beginning of Wrath is pretty simple, and actually, luckily for warriors who are extremely gear dependent, there isn't a ton of gear at the beginning that's hard to get, and a lot of it's actually BOE, which is super nice. So basically, the Bis Gearing is going to be your 5-piece PvP set, which you can swap one of them out for an ARP piece if you do find it. Otherwise, though, the 5-piece is totally fine, and you never want to break the 4 set, because the 4 set's very strong. And then for your bracers, boots, and belt, you'll be doing the Deadly. This is Furious because the new season just started on the seasonal ladder, but it'll be 213 eye level. There are some alternatives you can run, but the honor gear works totally fine, especially those 3 pieces, as they still have strength, versus if you had the honor cape and or neck. As you can see, it doesn't have any strength or agility on it. So if you're playing with a Pally, which is pretty often, you wouldn't be benefiting from their King's buff. So then you'll be running the Malygos 25 necklace. I believe this is dropped from the heroic lens of the iris or whatever, which is from Sapphiron, I believe, from Next 25. And it eventually gives you quests to kill Malygos 25, and you get this really high eye level neck with armor pin and agility, and agility is really important. That is what you want. And then for your cape, you can just do the honor one. Or if you can get your hands on it, the cape off of KT is BIS. Even though it has haste on it, it'll still be your best setup. And if your weapon, it's off KT. Pretty much all the best weapons are off KT for everybody. You get this 226 weapon. However, if you can't get this, even though it doesn't have armor pin, it still is BIS because of the high eye level. But if you can't get this, then the 213 Death Spite, I believe it's called, as well as the PvP weapon work totally fine. And that is a good alternative. Then for your range, you'll do Spinning Fate, just say perfectly statted with agility, so it helps with your crit. And then for your trinkets, if you're human, you'll be doing Darkmoon Card Greatness, a BOE, yay! And then you can either do Darkmoon Card Berserker, or you can also do the Anvil of Titans, which is really easy to get from Winter's Grasp. You just got to get some marks. Or you could also get something like the Trinket in Nax, and maybe some other alternatives. So it's actually not too hard. And if you're not playing human, then you just buy Darkmoon Card Greatness and a medallion and call it a day. And for your rings, this one's really nice. Surge Needle Ring, BOE, agility, perfect stats. Basically a signet of Twilight from the end of Wrath, which is BIS. This drops off Malygos 25, and you'll just be able to buy this on the auction house, so that's nice. If your other ring, you can get the Honor one, which doesn't have strength on it, but if you really need a hit, it still has Resil on it, so it's not bad. However, you can also run this other ring. I forgot the exact name of it, but I think it's called a Great Ring of something, and it's a 213 that has armor pin on it. I'll link it in this video. And that will be your Bis Gearing for the beginning. All right, so I'm going to be showing you pretty much your Bis Gearing at the end of Wrath, as well as how you'll be gearing pretty much the whole time with just a few exceptions. So you'll be doing your 5-piece PvP in almost all circumstances, which is your helmet, shoulders, chest, gloves, and legs. But the one exception is if you want to have a little more armor pin, you could run a PvE piece like helmet, shoulders, chest typically, as the tier sets will have armor pin on them, which you can't find on any of the main PvP sets. But you don't want to break your force set, as you really want to have that shorter intercept cooldown as well as the huge attack power bonus you get. And you'll be doing a PvE necklace, which is just high eye level and armor pin. It's very important that you get a PvE neck and cape, because these have your main stat, either strength or agility, which means when you typically play with the paladin, which is most of the time, you'll be getting that 10% bonus, versus if it's just the attack power, you will be completely missing out on the king's bonus. And then for the cape, this is armor pin crit, but it also has agility, and yes, that is agility. In Wrath, you really need to be critting, as if you're not critting, you're not getting rage. If you're not getting rage, you're not pressing buttons, and we want to be pressing our buttons. And for bracers, also an agility piece, but this one's crit ARP. And then for your weapon, you'll be running a two-hander, typically an axe or polearm, as the crit is very nice. In BC, it was more about the maces and the swords, but in Wrath, it's really about the axes. The mace can kind of work because you can do the 15% ARP. It kind of just depends on what is the weapon you can acquire, but if it's up to you, you want to get an axe or polearm. And then for your one-hander shield, this is going to be just a PvP one with Resil, because you just want to have as much defensive capability as possible, and then a PvP shield, which is just fat, stamina, and Resil. One thing to note, this is one of the biggest pluses with going JC. You can get a Resil gem in your PvP weapon or whatever piece you're using, and then you can just have your weapon, your two-hander, just have all damage on it. So when you really want to go defensive, you can throw on your one-hander shield, and when you don't want to go fully offensive, you'll just have all ARP gems in there. So that's one big plus with jewel crafting that a lot of people don't notice. Then for your throwing / ranged, you'll just get the crossbow at the end of Wrath, but for instance at the beginning of Wrath, it's basically just whatever you can find that's got hit or crit and or ARP on it. And then for the belt, it'll just be PvE, crit ARP, because your PvP options aren't too great. You pretty much just have the crit Resil, and then you can also get the badge one, which I believe is crit hit, but no ARP options there. Then for boots, we'll be doing Apocalypse's Advance. This is from Ruby Sanctum Heroic, a very nice piece because it's got a huge eye level. You will notice there's no ARP on it. That's the only downside, but that allows you to get it on most of your other pieces because this will fulfill most of your hit. You can buy the Hell Frozen Bone Grinders, which are very easy to get. It's just a blacksmith who makes it. Eye level 264 that are, I believe, crit ARP. I used them back in the original Wrath, actually. If you don't want to raid, that is a really good alternative. And for your rings, you'll just do PvE rings. The PvE one isn't too good as they don't ever have your main stat. Like I said, agility and strength are never found on them. So you really want to get the PvE ones if possible, or at least BOEs that have your main stat. So we'll do the Ashen Verdict and then the Frostbrood Sapphire Ring. You can also run the Signet of Twilight at the end of Wrath over one of these. Probably this one, if you want the hit and you manage to get it. Trinkets, as a human, you'll just be running both. If I only had to run one, I would do the DBW, as that one just has proc lasts so long you can get a ton of pressure going with it, versus the STS is only 15 seconds. But if you are running anything but human, you'll just run a medallion and you're good. And one big thing to note, even if you can only get, let's say, the normal versions of this, like the 271 or the 264 or the 264 here or the 271 here, they're still worth it. Actually, that applies to all of the pieces essentially, because usually the PvP options just aren't that good other than the 5 main pieces. And for gemming and enchanting, it's pretty simple for the most part. You're just gonna be throwing in resil gems pretty much wherever possible, unless you really want to get the socket bonus so you're not sacrificing too much. Then you could throw in a red, and you won't throw really any oranges in for the most part because there are no armor pin resil gems. You would love those if they existed, but they don't. I'm just throwing resil here, resil, and then armor pin in the belt, and then just resil, 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 resil. But in the weapon, you'll be throwing in armor pin gems, and ideally you'll throw in 1 JC gem. That way when you swap between your one-hander and two-hander, you can have one that's full resil, and then one that's got your armor pin DPS. And just resil gems, and resil, and I am throwing an all stat gem in here. You could also throw that in a different piece if you wanted, but I want to get the 6 resil bonus. This will help activate your meta gem, as that one needs 1 of every gem. And most of the blue gems are pretty bad for melee, so you don't want to really be wasting that on like a ARP stamina gem or something. And then for your belt, you'll throw in resil, shoulders resil, neck resil, and then helmet. I'm throwing actually a 10 strength 10 hit, because with this really high eye level gear setup I'm running, I need to actually throw some hit on my gloves and just need 10 more from a gem. So that's why I'm doing that there. It's not ideal, but that is with this gear setup. And then for your enchants, you're just going to throw in the Winter's Grass enchants, shoulders and helmet. They're available for the whole game. And then for the meta, you'll just do the agility crit, and you want to do the agility one over the 21 crit, as if you're playing with a pally, which you probably are, you will get a benefit with Blessing of Kings, which you wouldn't otherwise. And then for the chest, you'll be throwing resil enchant, cape, just agility, more crit, bracers attack power, weapon berserking. You can also do executioner. I just prefer berserking. And then your scope really doesn't matter, but 40 crit if you really care. And then boots, you gotta get run speed. Don't do rocket boots. The movement speed is too important. And then legs, you do resil, and then gloves is hit. But if you don't need the hit from the gloves, then you do the crusher enchant, which I believe is 44 AP. I will be putting most of these macros into my description box, so that way you guys can just copy pasta them, and let's get into them. Out of all the classes, I think warriors need macros the most. If you've never used them and then you start using them, you'll notice a significant improvement to your gameplay. The reason for that is warriors' abilities are based off their weapon types. So the most important one is spell reflect. If you're in berserker stance and you hit this macro, it'll put you into battle stance, put on a shield one-hander, and then cast spell reflect. But if you're already in battle or defensive, it will just keep you in that stance and then do what I just said. And then we have the shield block macro. Basically, this will do the same thing. It'll throw on your shield one-hander, go defensive stance, cast shield block for you, and then shield wall, which you usually need to cast pretty quickly. This one also will cancel aura your blade storm, so if you're in the middle of that and you need to go hard defensive, you mash this, it'll cancel your blade storm, put you in defensive stance, throw on your shield one-hander, and cast your shield wall, and then you probably won't die. Can't even use this in BC, but you can in Wrath. And then we will have things like the recklessness macro. This one just go into berserker stance and cast recklessness. Then we have a shield bash macro. This one will equip your one-hander and shield, and then it's arena 1, 2, 3. So if I hit F, it'll kick my target. Then if I hit shift F, control F, or alt F, it'll kick my 1, 2, 3 target without me even targeting them. And then I also have that for pummel. It's the exact same thing essentially. This one also will throw you in a berserker stance. And then we just have an arena 1, 2, 3 for hamstring, and then a charge 1, 2, 3, and then an intercept 1, 2, 3. Also, the charge and intercept macros will put you in the right stance as well. And then we just have a start attack berserker stance on Whirlwind, and then we have another arena 1, 2, 3 with this arm. And then we have a intervene macro. This one's very important. Basically, if I hit H, it'll just automatically go to my party 1. So if you're doing arenas with 2s, it'll always go to your partner no matter who you're with. And then shift H, control H, alt H for me, that will go to my respective party members. And you can also add more if you're playing 5s, for instance. And then we just have a T-clap, which is a start attack macro, because if you hit T-clap and you're just standing there, it's like, okay, what are you doing? And then we have a shattering throw macro. This will cancel aura your hand of protection, and it's an arena 1, 2, 3. This one's almost overkill. You really don't even need this, but I have it. And then we just have a retaliation macro, and this one will throw you into battle stance and cast your retal. This move is also very powerful in Wrath for anyone who hasn't played warrior in it.